Everyone, welcome back to the deceptive and controlling Comic Vault. I am Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
Today, Eric and I are going to start off with this week's featured book. It's Supreme Power. It's the first 12 issues of JMS's Supreme Power, which was released back in the early 2000s and was requested from our patron, Ian McKee. Thanks a bunch, Ian, for your support on the channel. And today, we're going to talk about this for you. And this is something that I've actually meant to talk about for a long time. I had never read this. I bought it a long time ago. It's JMS. I was curious about it. It's a thing people had told me was worth reading.
This used to be a big deal
as one of the what if superheroes existed in the real world, and kind of aping superhero, mostly DC archetypes of like yeah, but what if they weren't like the perfect altruistic people? They were at least in the golden age. And obviously we've done this kind of stuff with those characters specifically lots of times now. This
is coming off the heels of the Ultimates.
Yeah, this reads so much like an artifact from another time now, and it's really interesting because it's weird reading this after a world where injustice exists and stuff like that. And even I guess Kingdom Come predates this, but Kingdom Come was a thing that kind of did this with some of the characters that this is actually aping. Yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely.
This used to be a really big deal. When I was coming into comics, this was a big deal. This is a comic everyone was talking about, and I
can't tell you the last time I heard anybody mention it until Ian asking us to review it.
Part of it, I think, is that it doesn't have an ending.
Yeah,
it eventually switches over to being Marvel Knights, and apparently JMS was like, Marvel Knights, while less creatively restrictive than regular Marvel, is not as free to be as adult as Max, and he was kind of floundering, and so it just, it doesn't even have an ending. It just stops. I think that hurts it in the long run.
It's weird because all Marvel Knights stuff that I know fits in 616. Did they have out-of-continuity stuff?
They must have.
Because this cannot work in that continuity.
No, it must have, because it was a continuation of this.
That's really interesting, yeah.
Yep.
I was going to ask you about that. If this was all there was and it actually had an ending, if it was 12 issues like Watchmen and it had an ending, and I know there's 6 more under the same banner, which we just don't have. We just have this first trade, and so that's what we're
Supreme Power goes to 18, and there's a Hyperion miniseries that's 5 issues that's written by JMS.
Okay. Is any of that stuff in trade?
All of it's in trade.
Oh, okay.
And there's spin-offs. There are books about these characters written by other people.
And we may try to come back to this if there's any interest. Since I had this, and since it was a whole 12 issues we had to read, we decided to start with this and just review this. So I hope Ian doesn't mind, but I couldn't imagine reading all that stuff at once. This is pretty dense. There's a lot here. We'll have a lot to talk about. But I wonder if it was a more concise piece, and if it was just one big hardcover, if maybe we would still be talking about it like we do Watchmen.
I mean, maybe. He kind of did that with Rising Stars. Rising Stars is 24 issues. It's by the same writer.
And I think people talk about it.
I think it's a wonderful work, and people don't remember it. Part of that's because of how long it took to come out.
JMS has this in common with Peter David, where he has these like either seminal runs on things or things that he created himself that were beloved and still are with people who are fans of those creators, but they kind of fall away and you don't hear about them. You
don't hear about JMS's Thor at all.
Yeah.
And it was a top 10 book for its entire run.
Wow.
That's really interesting. It wasn't just the first couple issues. Like issue 8 was a top 10 book.
And JMS isn't a guy who, like Peter David, makes waves and stuff.
Yeah. Not really.
I don't think.
I mean, a little bit when he left Marvel.
Yeah, he's talked candidly about things, but I think he gets along with people while he's there.
Yeah, it seems to be. He hasn't been banned from any companies like Peter David.
And that's nothing against Peter David. I'm just
I
saying,
love Peter David.
Just factually things we know about these creators.
Peter David seems a little bit more combative.
I just don't know why JMS gets the short of the end of the stick sometimes the way he does. Although he's certainly had. I think he's gotten more opportunities overall than Peter David probably has. I don't know why I'm suddenly comparing these guys, but anyway.
They're similar. They're similar writers, I think. So Supreme Power is the Squadron Supreme, which Hickman used recently.
Did he really?
Well, yeah, in his Avengers stuff, I'm pretty sure Squadron Supreme plays a role in that. We had the Squadron Supreme book, I think, last year. Nighthawk had a book, I think, last year.
I forgot about that. See, the thing is, I don't know those characters until, I mean, I do now, I read this book, but before this, I didn't know who those characters were, and it was, So this is one of those things where there are words that get thrown in titles that I don't know are related. So I didn't know that this had anything to do with Squadron Supreme until I read it.
Yeah. And Squadron Supreme starts in Avengers as Squadron Sinister, which was just a way for the Justice League and the Avengers to fight. And then we just kept using them, and we created a universe where they were superheroes.
And what he means is they were based on DC characters, but they couldn't. Those companies weren't going to get together and.
Nighthawk is not Batman. Hyperion is not Superman. Power Princess is not Wonder Woman.
Right.
It's a lot of that.
And
the Wizards here,
who's Aquaman.
Yeah, and she was not originally a girl.
Okay.
Because there's notes in the back where like they designed the costumes.
Oh, I didn't look at those. Yeah.
Oh, you have to see what the costumes for Power Princess. It's amazing. Like how adult they're intending to go, and I'm interested to know if they do it.
And there's a Flash kid. Is there a specific parallel with Dr. Spectrum?
He's Green Lantern.
Okay, of course. I just said Spectrum, and then I answered my own question. While I was reading it, I wasn't exactly sure what it was supposed to be, and I guess that makes perfect. I guess it's just because it wasn't an artifact that came to Earth that chose him.
But I don't know what the original origin is, because I'm pretty sure it doesn't come from Hyperion. I'm pretty sure that's part of the kind of ultimization of.
That's why I didn't think of it, because I had my head in a Krypton place, and so I was just thinking, which is funny. I'm going to be talking about Krypton stuff later. But I had my head in Krypton place, so it was hard not to just connect him to Superman mythology. I was like, who is this guy?
No, it seems. My guess is not having read any of the Squadron Supreme stuff before this. My guess is he streamlined a lot of stuff and makes all of it come from Hyperion and Hyperion's arrival, which is fun because
it makes more sense. It's like the thing in why can't I think of it, the superhero book series I just reviewed.
Wild Cards.
It's like Wild Cards,
yes.
Where it all has to come from the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's also coming from Hyperion. I think is really interesting because it literalizes Superman.
Yes.
All superheroes stem from him.
Right, yeah.
Except for maybe Power Princess. I'm really unclear on that, and I hope that's fixed in the next 6 issues. Or I hope that's cleared up, because that's the one thing I'm like, I don't know where this is going or what's happening.
I don't either. Well, I had a hard time not glazing over when she starts explaining their backstory in rhyme, and I like.
Well, and also
as an epic poem,
the pictures are clearly not depicting what's happening. So like she's lying.
That's what I thought.
I think she's crazy.
But I
don't think
sure
she's lying.
Right.
I think she's crazy.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's my read on that.
She's speaking as an epic poet.
Yep.
In those scenes, and then I kept expecting her to keep doing that, and that's not how she regularly talks.
No, it's just like when she's talking about the history or whatever. Almost as if it was. Almost as if
she's Homer. Like
almost as if it was already written down. She's just reciting.
That's what I thought it was. Yeah. So maybe she actually believes it, and then we're seeing what really happened.
Yeah, I think that's possible.
Okay.
But
sorry, we digress.
But so the general setup for this is a small boy in a spacecraft from a dying planet comes to Earth, is found by two farmers,
and then
immediately the government shows up, takes the baby, and says, we're gonna raise this baby to be the most like pure American we possibly can. They get 2 agents to pretend to be his parents, to raise him to believe as purely as possible in the American ideal, and to believe in state before everything else, kind of.
Also, that they can control him as a weapon.
Yes, and they use him to intervene in different political arenas and things like that, and war zones and whatnot. And then eventually it gets to a point where they have to reveal that this person exists. And
because a reporter found out about him.
Yeah, and so they make him into a superhero, and they reveal him, and they send him around the country, like, putting out fires and things, but they now have another superhero called Dr. Spectrum, who has a piece of Hyperion ship that is merged with him.
He was an agent in the field.
Yeah, and like he has like the most insane willpower. And so he's able to control this thing that's like thought-based.
Yeah, obviously it's Green Lantern. I feel so dumb now because it didn't even occur that I read. Now, to be fair, I was behind today. I read this like an hour before we started recording.
And then, so they're now using Dr. Spectrum to go attack other political.
I didn't realize the willpower thing was the reason he was able to control it, though.
Well, that's why they pick him. Is because it's thought-based. It's someone that
has
to be
right. I forgot it was
so focused that their thoughts will never wander. Because this thing can theoretically seem to do anything. So they're using him now.
And then anybody else who touches it after it's bonded with him,
just completely
explodes.
So they're now using him to do like covert Black Ops operations, while saying, well, it can't be Hyperion because Hyperion is over here saving a kitten from a tree.
Yeah.
And then Hyperion starts to learn about this. And while this is happening, there's a kid who's a speedster who isn't actually being a superhero. He's just getting endorsements. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a Batman who's fascinating.
That kid is basically, what if Peter Parker's uncle didn't get murdered,
mm-hmm.
and
he
just kept doing the wrestling thing? That's what it is.
And then there's a Batman character who's fascinating. He's a black man whose parents were murdered by a white supremacist. And now he's gone extreme the other way. And then there's also an Aquaman-like chick called Amphibian.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with her.
Who was born to normal parents, but born as like an amphibian thing, and I don't know what's happening with her because it's not resolved in this. And then also there is some kind of ancient goddess that has been worshipped for centuries by this almost like cult
I guess was also from Hyperion's world.
That's what she says in the story, but I don't think that's true. I think she comes from somewhere different. I think she is the one person that we see that does not come from him and his genes and his ship. I think she's the one person, or somehow it just brought her back to life, but I don't think she's actually connected to him in the way she says she is. I don't think she's Supergirl.
Yeah, because she talks about how like they're separated by 2,000 years, and they sent out couples as to different planets, and they got separated.
Yeah, I might be wrong. I only have the 12 issues. My read is that none of that is true.
And like I'm with you, it didn't seem like what we were seeing was exactly what she was saying, but I wasn't sure how.
Well, and it starts breaking down. Like there's a point where she refers to ships, and then we see like Greek ships. Which makes me think.
Yeah, I don't know what that.
They're not actually related. I think she's crazy. That is my read on her. Is that she's a crazy person.
That wasn't really the sense I got from it.
Okay.
But you might be right. I wasn't totally sure how to read it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's frustrating about this is I feel like this. I should have gotten a complete story with this and
with 12 issues.
Yeah.
It's a real slow decompressed burn. Real slow decompressed. Real slow burn. I don't know how to structure those words correctly.
Or I just wish. It was
you decide.
Or I just wish I knew it was resolved in those other 6 issues and I had read all of it. It's just I know it doesn't really end.
I've heard that if you read through the Hyperion mini, it resolves enough.
Oh, okay.
That you could be okay with stopping there.
That's frustrating.
Yeah.
It feels like a thing that would have a definitive ending. Like, it feels like a thing that should be self-contained.
Well, and I wonder, like, it's clearly written to be an ongoing. It's not written to be like a short mini. But I wonder if he had like a 50-issue plan. There would be an ending, but it would be a run.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay.
That's how it reads to me. Is that he has a long game. It's going to be an epic
He's doing
run.
a lot of setup because he's got a lot to say with these characters.
Yeah, and he does have a lot to say with these characters. I think this book is fascinating. I'll right out of the gate say I love this book. I will buy this hardcover, and I will buy the second one because it collects the rest of it and the Hyperion miniseries. It's right in my wheelhouse. I love the Ultimates. I love the Authority. I read this and I'm like, oh man, I really need to get back to Wild Cards. Like, I like this stuff a lot. I also think this does a good job of saying it's individual enough from those other things. I don't feel like it's just a retread of the Ultimates or the Authority or Wild Cards or Watchmen.
No, I thought it was real unique.
Yeah,
which is impressive.
Or even Rising Stars, which is also written by the same writer.
Yeah, which is impressive because he's also redoing a thing that was that. In the mid-'80s.
Mm-hmm. Now, from what I understand, that original series is what if superheroes took control and then they were corrupted, whereas his is they never start from a good place.
Yeah.
It's from what I understand of the original series, it is like if the Justice League took over America, what would they do with that, and would they even be able to stay to their pure values? Whereas here they're just messed up.
But he talks in the foreword about how it was difficult for him to make sure that it was separate enough, but still true to that material. Mm-hmm. And so it's cool that it reads as unique as one of those. What if superheroes were in the real world, and what if they weren't? What if they had real character flaws and stuff, and not feel like he was just doing what had been done before. Now I haven't read that stuff, but it reads like, first of all, I think it's important to say that you don't need to have that stuff at all.
No, because neither of us have read the original or the miniseries.
It reads like he created these characters from the ground up.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
If it being a reimagining from something else, it reads like something completely brand new.
I want this to be a Netflix show, or an HBO show.
Really? Okay.
I think the first 6 issues is the best pilot I've ever seen for a superhero show.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't have that with it because it reads so much like a TV show that I feel like I already have that show. Like, I just don't need it. You know what I mean?
That's fair. I just...
He does a really good job with the in-moment flashbacks without making me feel like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
He does a lot of TV stuff, and I mean, JMS is... He's a TV stuff.
He does do a lot of TV stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you're a TV writer.
But it kind of works.
Yeah. There's one scene that I think you can remove entirely that would work on TV, when he goes to the confessional and we have a whole page of just one guy talking to the priest and then leaves. I was like, that works in TV because it's 30 seconds. This is a whole page.
Now, to be fair, there are things that he does in trying to utilize the comic book medium that you can't do in other things.
The last issue is wonderful.
Which I have reservations about. I'm back and forth on it. I don't love right away the idea of having 4 subplots happening simultaneously on the same page.
Oh, I don't
immediately like that. Until I was really engaged in each of them, I found that to be a bit of a chore, and I wondered if I shouldn't read one strip and then the second strip and then the third strip.
I thought about doing it like that too.
I thought about doing it like that, but what I didn't care for about that is I'm almost like, not mid-sentence, but mid-conversation, I'm having to jump to another subplot and then remember what just happened, and so then I flip the page and I have to get back into a different mode for each of the 4. Now, the 4th one is really interesting because for 6 pages, nothing's happening, and except for day is turning to night, and then you find out that what you've been learning about in the other 3 completely inform what the whole point of that 4th one is. That's really cool, and so ultimately I really appreciated what it was doing, but it took me too long to get into that idea.
My biggest problem was I thought there were wasted panels. Where like it would just be like...
It also took me too long to realize that I was supposed to read all the way across the page.
Wait, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, because I read down.
I don't know how you'd even do it like that, but no, you're supposed to read all the way across the page.
Oh, okay. I didn't read it like that. But my biggest issue was things where it was like, because it's... I'm trying to describe this. It is 4 vertical panels that take up the whole page, and so the top panel is one thing, the second panel is one thing, the third panel is one thing, and the fourth panel is one thing. There were a couple of instances where I really didn't like it, where it was like...
Yeah, I just cannot show this book to the camera because there's so much nudity. But,
and not until like issue like...
No, yeah, I mean, you go all the way across because the action keeps going. Like,
well, yeah, but it just keeps intercutting anyways. Like, I read this and then this.
You could do it that way, but I think that would frustrate me even more because there are... It's clear that there are certain bits where he's wanting you to go straight across so you don't have to remember this to the next thing. Like this is a part of a conversation, and then you get to the next part of it. Like,
yeah, I just read it more chopped up than you did.
Okay, I guess you can do it.
But I don't like these. I don't like these. You only have one panel a page to communicate something about the story. I don't like where it's just like, and then the water bubbles, or someone's flying,
yeah.
or I thought like that was a waste. I don't know how else you would do it. I guess for some of that communication, just like in between scenes, but it's already so jumpy. I don't feel like I would be confused if all of a sudden Hyperion was somewhere.
Yeah, it's almost like it's being cinematic and doing things that only a comic can do simultaneously.
It's still decompressed, even in this style where you only get one panel a page for each story. It still feels decompressed.
And the thing is, he needed all those things. The idea is all these things are happening simultaneously, and that's why we have it that way. And again, it is really cool because because the comic medium is maybe the best place to do a thing like that, where you can actually show us that simultaneously these things are going on because you're not having to cut minute to minute from different things to different things. It's very difficult on television or in a movie to communicate that a scene is happening at the same time as another scene. So, I mean, that is really cool. But then when you make it really cinematic, like you're just looking at something happening with no dialogue, then it feels like I'm back into the movie mode again. So I see what you're complaining about that.
But yeah, I like the last show. I adored this. I thought this was great. I'm a big fan of JMS in general.
Yeah.
I really appreciated and liked how adult it is, which is part of why I want this to be like a Netflix series, an HBO series. Is I'm still waiting for the big adult superhero thing that doesn't have to be grounded.
Yeah.
And also, there are things in this book that I think need to be on television right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's things in this book that really need to be on television right now, and so
it's really sophisticated and thoughtful about race issues.
Yeah,
and things like that. There are really compelling arguments on both sides of that issue in the book. I don't even want to really get into it because I want to encourage people to read this.
No, I agree. Well, and I also think
I get where Nighthawk is coming from. I guess I guess I tend to agree more with Hyperion, but then he's also... I
agree with the Blur. Like, he's the one that I was like, yeah, that character needs to exist in television right now. But I also thought the politics were really...
But I mean, Hyperion has a speech about it.
Yeah.
Which I do kind of agree with.
No, and I agree. I sent you that panel.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh, somebody wrote a comic book about this. Who knew?
Where he says, like, let's help everyone.
Yeah.
Well, you see, but then the more I'm thinking about it, no, I guess you're right. I guess there is a three-pronged argument going on, and the Blur probably has the closest to my feelings on that, because the flaw in Hyperion's logic is that because he says we should be completely colorblind, and the flaw in his logic is that we're just not there yet. And you do have to have to think about those issues and the fact that people aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if you are, not everyone else is.
Yeah, because it's too easy to pretend like you're helping everyone else when you're not focused enough on the people who need it most.
Yeah. But
it's a really heavy book.
Yeah,
impossible not to talk about politics within.
I really like the narrative. I really like some of the politics of the book, not the like political points of the book, but that like I like that the government isn't just all straw men. Like they're not all General Lang.
No, it's really nuanced about because there are people in the government who are trying to control Hyperion who kind of come to care about him and who sort of feel bad about things that they feel like they have to do. There's some wonderful ends justifies the means versus value-based ethics questions in this. And I have not... I'll go this far. I don't think I've sympathized with a government that was trying to force someone to do their bidding, pretending like they were his friend, like this ever. I don't think I've ever sympathized with the government as much as I have in this. And they are the bad guys in that situation.
Absolutely.
But then you also have to hold Hyperion accountable for things that he's doing, but he's wonderfully sympathetic as well, and you can completely understand how he gets to where he gets. I also think it's really impressive that there's a moment that I thought was kind of a light switch moment with Hyperion that the farther I read, the more I totally bought it, where I was like, he's gone too quickly against the guy. For a minute, I thought it was kind of a typical TV thing where it was like, well, he just hates them because they're lying to him, and he's not even figured out why they're lying yet. And then the farther I read, the more I was like, no, this is exactly what this guy would do.
Yeah. Well, and I also like that he's not... It's not immediately like crazy evil Superman.
He's not like going around killing everyone.
Yeah. No, he's really thinking about it. He doesn't exactly.
And I love the collateral damage and friendly fire thing.
Yeah.
Where people get hurt and die just as a consequence of him walking around.
The bullets ricochet off of him. And things like that.
Well, and where you somewhat sympathize with the government a little bit, except for obviously their motivations are not completely altruistic. You have to cordon this kid off while he's growing up, because that's the thing we have to sweep under the rug a lot with Superman, where he's just able to control his powers too readily. And Smallville sometimes handled that as well as they possibly could, where basically the Crypto-Freaks were what this guy is, and Clark just got lucky and had really good parents. Where they do the puberty metaphor in that show with Heat Vision, where he almost sets girls on fire when he gets aroused, but it doesn't actually happen. This is the book where that kind of thing the thing with the dog.
The thing with the dog is great. Yeah. Like, it's so good. And this works on the... it's kind of somewhere between the two things we do with Superman, where like sometimes Superman's powers don't hit till puberty, and sometimes he's a super strong baby.
Yeah.
He's a strong baby that becomes Superman, Like it's a slightly more gradual thing, but it's not like all of a sudden I have X-ray vision, I have heat vision. Like,
well, and Smallville is that way too.
Yeah, that's true.
Where as he's getting older, he's getting stronger. He's not like early on in that show, bullets bounce off him, but he gets bruises, and later he doesn't have bruises. I mean, that's the thing I always really appreciated in that show, and he develops some of his powers over time. They're not fully consistent about it, and I don't know why one of the first things he can do is fly, but he never uses it. That always bugged me in that show. First episode, he's hovering over death. No, that's dumb. When you develop super hearing in like the 4th or 5th season, no, that's ridiculous. But this does that right. Where his skin is getting stronger over time, and they say that early on you could jackhammer into him for like an hour, and then eventually you'd actually start to scratch him. But as he gets older, you can't do that anymore, and you have to come up with basically atomic alternatives. Yeah, if you need to kill
Which is
him.
such a cool thing. I don't know why I've never seen like the atomic thing they come up with. I was like, why isn't this been more like, why isn't just everyone rip this off? This is a great science fiction weapon.
The atomic bomb that doesn't have radiation, or
yeah, but like there's a way about the way it's explained where I'm like, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
like, that seems like a thing we would just all be writing.
Well, and the way they lured him, I totally bought.
Yeah, me too.
And that was really sad. I mean, I don't know. Do you feel for this guy? Like I do. I really feel for him.
I feel for everyone. Like the guy that lures him and then kills himself, kind of.
Yeah.
Even him, I was like, because here's the thing. The thing that the book never lets you forget is everything that these people have done is terrible. However, Hyperion is terrifying.
Yeah.
One of my favorite bits is when the parents...
and we try to do this all the time with Superman now.
Yeah. When they ask the parents, they're like, well, you spent all of this time with him. Like, did you come to love him like a son? And they're like, yeah, kind of, but I was never not scared.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah, and that moment where they don't want anything to do with each other anymore.
Yeah. I also like the moment where they sleep together and it never happens again.
Yeah.
I like that. I wish that was followed up on, because I can never get a sense after that moment whether they start bickering more or...
no, I had that too.
I wish it was followed up on a little bit.
My assumption is that the relationship after that is just real distant. Mm-hmm. They hardly speak to each other.
I love the scene where he's like, do you actually love Mom? And he's like, yeah, of course I do. Mm-hmm. And there's weird metaphors going on there too for like actual parents raising, where like the parents are kind of drifting apart from each other, but they don't want the kids to know and things like that.
So there was a question I had about the logic on the side of the government, A, and B, Hyperion's lack of reaction when they tell him that his foster parents have died in a boat accident, but they actually you just go off and live new lives under assumed names. Hyperion was supposed to go with them. And the government guys convince him not to go, and then his parents get killed. How is he not already angry with them?
Well, it's... because it's not both of them. It's just supposed to be a trip for him and his dad, and his mom's like, well, I'll go with you. And
right, I know that, but at that time, he still thought he was going. They both go. If Hyperion had been there, in his mind, they wouldn't have died. Why is he not upset about that? Like,
yeah, that's true.
Any standard TV show would have done a whole episode where he's angry with the government and wants revenge or something.
That's true.
I was a little surprised that he didn't have any reaction at all.
I mean, he did have a reaction. Like he immediately freaks out and like goes to the bottom of the sea and
he has a reaction to their death, but he doesn't blame anyone, and there are people to blame. At least in his mind, I would think. I mean, he blames them later for the actual bad things they have done to him. I don't understand how that doesn't qualify, especially. And I wish it had come up. Because I don't think it does. I wish it had come up once he realizes that they have a spaceship and they've been lying to him all these years. Because they claim that his real parents died in like a plane crash or something. I forget what.
Yeah, they were like scientists or something.
Yeah, and they died, and he finds out that that they've been keeping a spaceship all along, and that they know that he comes from somewhere else, and that all along they've been grooming him to be to be a weapon for them, and he should have a point where he says, "Oh yeah, and also." I could have saved my parents because although no, because he does find out that they're still alive. I forgot about that.
Yeah. He finds out that they're his parents.
He finds out everything.
My guess would be the reason he doesn't blame the government is that he's been raised since birth, like never to blame the government. Like maybe it wouldn't even cross his mind at that moment because he's not started coming apart yet and started realizing
maybe.
Well, and one of the things about this book that I think works really effectively, and he talks about it in the foreword, is that there are no captions. You're never in anyone's head.
That's right.
Which works really well.
Again, it's a TV show.
Well, but also everyone's morally ambiguous.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that works really well.
But in that way, it would work really well as a TV show.
Yeah.
I guess part of the reason, and I'm not even resisting this, I guess part of the reason that I didn't have that reaction, like, I'd like to see this adapted, is it feels so much like a product of its time. I feel like a lot of people, even if this was adapted exactly the way it is, as much as you can do that, I think a lot of people would look at it and be like, yeah, it's another one of those. It's just a dime a dozen.
But I don't think it would.
It isn't. But that, I don't think you could even get people really excited about it because we have so many things like it.
But not on TV and not in the movies. We don't have that live action.
Here's the thing. We kind of do in that we play the cynical superhero question all the time. But
this is so much more
stuff. No, it is, absolutely. And so much more like actually mature. But
yeah. I mean, obviously, my first pick of all these would be wild cards. Like, obviously, that's the.
I don't know. I'll say, because I don't know how excited I can get about wild cards being adapted either. It's such a good prose thing.
That's true.
But no, actually, I would rather see this adapted than wild cards. The more I'm thinking about it, I think it's more easily adaptable too.
And I also think
because this does very much read as storyboards.
Yeah. And I also think that Marvel is willing to take risks on properties. Like, I will never get the authority, even though all of their major things aren't working at DC, they'll never try something experimental like that.
Yeah.
They'll never actually do the R-rated superhero thing, with like a group of characters you've never heard of. Marvel could.
Yeah,
I don't think they would go back to this, but I think they
Watchmen
could.
is because it's so popular.
It's Watchmen, yeah. No, I really adored this. I will buy that book, and I will buy the second one.
No, I liked it a lot, too. And I was not in the mood for a thing like this because I just got done with wild cards, and I was kind of I've been lately more in a traditional superhero mood as opposed to the more realistic what if kind of thing. But this brought me back into that mood, which is a big testament to it because I wasn't really that excited about reading another one of those right now.
Yeah. It is slow and it is wordy. I will tell people that.
The page. I don't think it's as slow as you make it out to be.
I think more could have gotten done in 12 issues.
Yeah.
Like, when I get to the end of issue 12, I'm like,
fair,
oh, that's all that's happened.
But
part of it's because of all the subplots.
No, that's fair, but as I'm reading along, I'm not looking at my watch and...
No, me either. But like, when I got to the end, I was like, and we never did anything with Amphibian. 12 issues, we never did anything.
I definitely had that feeling at the end of it, but it was a page-turner for me.
Well, and there's also
like, as I'm going along, it was
there's
a
point, maybe around like 7 or 8, where I'm like, how long ago did we introduce all of the other superheroes? Because we have that one issue that gives all the instructions. I'm like, we haven't touched back on like any of those.
Yeah.
And then we start doing it.
This would have felt like much more of a slog reading in issues, most certainly. I mean, this is a thing to read, to sit down and read all together.
It's because he chose to have a point of view character. It's all kind of through Hyperion's. We go to other people, but like, this is Hyperion's story. He didn't write it like a team book, where like we're following all these different people. It kind of becomes that, but it's all through Hyperion and Hyperion's world, and then it outstretches from that.
Which is a really interesting idea, because being sort of the anti-Superman, because he's raised by the government, instead of actually being allowed to be a traditionally raised American kid, he is the most alien thing, obviously, on the planet. There's nothing else like him, and yet he is kind of our end of the world, and it totally works. I love the speech he has about how maybe in order to in order to save the world and bring people together, you need someone objective enough.
An alien,
You need an alien that's objective enough, that's not connected to anyone else. I really
doesn't see borders.
I really bought into that, and obviously I'm making comparisons the entire time to to Superman because he's the direct analog, and I'm thinking, wow, that's a really interesting argument for why Superman might be somewhat inherently problematic, because he is raised with particular values, and I mean, like, Hyperion is also and raised with some of those same values, trying to be forced to be the all-American kid, but then when he steps behind all that and kind of sees the facade and stuff, he and sees himself as the alien, he thinks about all that very differently. And so, in one way, Superman is that, right? Where he's different from the rest of us, and he has if he sees himself as human and cares about us, he has to be, you know, extra responsible because he has these powers that require this massive sense of responsibility. But on the other hand, if he's raised too American and too isolated, does he not think about certain kinds of people as more his people than other people? And that's not a thing we really talk about a whole lot with Superman, because he is usually supposed to be the ideal, and he is colorblind and he doesn't have that. But in real life, would he? You know what I mean? Would he have too much of the Midwest kind of traditionally conservative kinds of views, where he wouldn't even notice certain oppression that happens to entire kinds of people,
or just other countries? Superman defines himself as an American,
right?
Could he help himself but think of himself as an American, and as America as he is?
And that's why Hyperion has a great point. And on the surface, it sounds like he's right, but then you take it to its furthest conclusion, and it's terrifying, because he says, well, I'm an American, but I'm not an American, I'm for the whole world, and now he thinks it's his duty to go and make decisions unilaterally.
Yeah. I love the idea. If we assume that the couple that find him are Jonathan and Martha,
right?
I love the idea that the government takes him away from the most, like, pure traditional American family and artificially creates the most pure traditional American family. I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Because you can make an argument that if only they had left him where he was,
he would be Superman.
They might have gotten effectively what they want, except they wouldn't be able to control him. So he would have all the values that they want him raised with, except for the loyalty one. Except for the loyalty to us, regardless of what we tell you to do.
Well, and as the book goes on, like, there's this sense of, like, it's kind of a no-win situation. They were never going to get that in the end. There is no way that this doesn't end with him finding out what's going on, and starting to question things. As a developing, maturing adult. Like, even if he didn't find out all the conspiracy stuff, like, he's going to find out things about the government that the government does.
What makes this a difficult question to answer, the thing I'm about to ask you, is that we don't have a complete piece here. But does this read a little bit like, sort of like a 1984 of superhero things, just in that it's... I don't mean that it's like a massively exaggerated thing. I just mean that it's a cautionary thing. It's not optimistic, really. Or is it?
But the way I read it, I felt like it could have gotten to that place.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering. Is the point of this to say, like, here's how everything could go bad, or is it just in this world everything starts from that place, but it could get better? I just don't know, because I don't have the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think this book is optimistic or cynical. I think it's kind of just putting superheroes in the real world, and what is that like?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's cynical either. Because I cared about everybody.
Yeah. It's not. They're not all cartoon characters. And
it doesn't say that no one has humanity. I mean, there is humanity all over this book.
Yeah, and it also doesn't say that there aren't bad people and there aren't good people. It's just everyone's kind of varying grades of good and bad.
And I didn't, like, it gets really violent and it's really adult. I didn't find this book merciless. Like, I thought it was.
It doesn't feel dour.
It was kind of entertaining.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised by that, because everything we're talking about sounds real heavy, real heady, but I was entertained by it. And there are moments of levity.
Yeah, and there's some genuinely funny moments and things like that. There's one, I can't remember what it was, but there's one that I thought was really funny. But I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But there's a genuinely funny joke in that book. It's really enjoyable. It's not just, like, intellectually stimulating. It's enjoyable.
Yeah.
I really liked it. I really want to see where it goes as much as it goes.
So we want to thank Ian a whole lot for asking us to review this, and I'm so glad that I read this.
Yeah, me too.
And I guess it's just I feel like I need to go back and sit down and watch and revisit or excuse me, read and revisit Watchmen now, just because I'm doing all of these kinds of things right now anyway. You know, I did Wild Cards and now this. And
you should. I feel like we should do Rising Stars.
It might be time to return to Ultimates.
Oh yeah, we still have to do Ultimates too.
We were going to do Ultimates too,
yep.
so we should probably go back and do that at some point. But anyway, so Eric, what else would you like to talk about? You had some more comic book things.
I do. I have some more comic book things.
And I have one extra comic book thing.
Do you want to mix and match, or do you want me to go just through all mine and then you go through?
Well, do you have anything that you think is going to take quite a while to talk about? Because you have, what, 2, 3 things there?
I have 3 things.
Why don't you do 2 of the shorter ones, and then I'll do mine, and then you do one, maybe.
Okay.
Is that
all right? So
I'll
do Berserk last.
Okay. Is Berserk the long one? Okay.
Probably.
Sure. Go ahead.
So this I read in the half hour. Cap had to set some stuff up after I came home from work before we started recording. So I decided to read the first volume of the Ultraman manga, which I read before. I own the first 4. I've read the first 2, and I've been in tokusatsu mood lately. Which will be nice for what we're going to cover on the next on the next omnibus. But I just pulled this out and I was like, I'll just read as much as I can of this. And I read the whole volume because manga reads really fast. It's interesting to read this because I'm not an Ultraman guy. I've seen the first couple episodes of Ultraman, but that's kind of it. I don't follow Ultraman. This is a sequel to the original Ultraman, ignoring everything that came after it. Because Ultraman is something that kind of has a continuity. And I think they even, in more recent stuff, have just gone like, and all that stuff that wasn't in continuity, it's just alternate dimensions, and now it's all, like, everything is now canon kind of a thing. This exists as if nothing has happened since the original Ultraman. We find out that the original Ultraman... Let me back up for a second. The premise of Ultraman...
So it sort of does that Godzilla thing?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. The premise of Ultraman is that there is a group of people called the Science Patrol, who I don't know what they do because I've never read Ultraman. They just seem to be kind of like science police, if that makes sense.
Could you get away with that title? Science Patrol?
In the 1950s, sure. They're this group that I think they're like the X-Files. Like they deal with weird things.
Yeah.
And then giant monsters start showing up. And this alien called Ultraman, I guess, merges... I'm not sure... They in this book, they refer to him as Ultraman, but he merges with a human being. And the human being has the ability to turn into Ultraman.
Oh,
and he's a big giant guy. I don't know if that being has its own name. They refer to him as... They refer to Ultraman as... Oh, it's on the first page. I can find it real quick. The Giant of Light? I don't know if that's the entity and then merged as Ultraman, because they also seem to refer to just the entity as Ultraman, so I don't know. And at the end of the series, the alien leaves the guy, and the guy continues on with normal life, and he goes back into space because the series is over. This picks up a little bit after that. That guy has had a kid, and we find out has no memories of the period of from when Ultraman first showed up to when he left. The guy has no memories of that. He's like, everyone tells me I was in the Science Patrol. I don't remember that happening. And then we find out his kid has superpowers. And that he has superpowers. His kid falls three floors. And is fine. And then some aliens start showing up, and there's a point when he's young where the government, where the guy currently running the Science Patrol, which as far as anyone knows has been shut down but is still running, comes to the dad and is like, we have this footage that we've doctored so that it doesn't include this, but there was a bizarre plane accident that there's the airplane company says was not a mechanical failure, but that's the only thing it could be. That's because the Science Patrol doctored the footage to hide the shadow of a monster destroying the plane. So they're readying for another alien invasion. They make an Ultraman suit for the guy to wear to fight monsters. And then a monster finally shows up, goes after his son. He shows up, he's like, I'm Ultraman. There's a great panel where he's like, it's a Superman shirt rip, where he's like, I'm Ultraman. And his dad's getting beat up, and then the head of the Science Patrol is like, hey, your dad's dying. We have a suit we made for you. He's not going to like it, but if you want to go help him, you can. And then he goes down, and he fights the monster. That's the entire book. It's really fast. It's all origin. Also, and I don't know if this ever changes, I don't think it does in the first 4 volumes I have, he's not giant. It's more like Kamen Rider. He's normal-sized, all the monsters normal-sized. They refer to Ultraman as giant, so it's not like this is a slightly alternate continuity. He's not giant, the monsters aren't giant. I don't know if we're building to that point, but at least as far as this one goes, he's not giant. I like this. It's weird. I think the artwork is darker than the actual storytelling. And so I get a darker vibe from the story that I think
interesting.
I might, just looking at the page, just looking at like the typed page.
There's almost a juxtaposition.
Yeah, where the artwork is very dark and very serious, and this is one of the rarer mangas where it is an artist and a writer team.
Yeah.
There is a writer and there is an artist.
One guy.
Yeah, usually it's one person. I like it. It's kind of the only thing we have for tokusatsu reading material in America.
Wow.
We've never published the Kamen Rider mangas. We've never published really Guyver over here. Like, this is kind of all we got right now. Although I think Comixology has, digitally you can get the original Kamen Rider manga.
Oh, that's nice.
This is kind of all we have right now. If you don't know about this, you should... I recommend this to Kamen Rider fans because it feels more like Kamen Rider than what I traditionally think of Ultraman as. Because it's nothing giant. It's just like a dude running around in a cool suit. It's fun. It's really fast read.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I know about Ultraman is that he's really big and he fights big monsters. We played that Super Nintendo game.
We
did
did.
We ever talk about that?
I don't think we did.
Did we actually mention it on camera?
I don't think we did.
Because that was hilarious.
It sucks.
It's terrible, but we had a lot of fun. Jason liked it.
Yeah. It
was very counterintuitive.
Yep. It was not great.
We should do we should do a playthrough on that at some point on the it'll be 5 minutes on the Patreon show.
Okay, so the other thing I'm going to talk about is James Bond Hammerhead, which is the third volume released by Dynamite. When I read this originally, I was really kind of blown away by this, and I was like, this is easily the best of the three, and more importantly, a huge return to form for Andy Diggle. With Diggle's name on it going into this, I was kind of like, it's probably going to be fine. Diggle's been in a rut for like a decade now. I haven't liked anything he's done since. And I love The Losers, and I love Green Arrow Year One. And then he went to Marvel, and his career has never been the same.
Yeah, you always say that he seems to just kind of phone stuff in. And
everything he writes feels phoned in. I don't know. I haven't read some of his more recent Create Your Own stuff, but I've also not heard good things about them either. But I love The Losers, and I love Green Arrow. Those two books are the closest things you can get to like an action movie in comic book form. It's really good. Both of them are drawn by Jock. That probably helps.
Yeah.
In my introduction to Jock. So he wrote Hammerhead, which I would describe as quintessential. This is the Bond movie I want.
Oh, cool.
It is the big action set pieces and the fast pace and the kind of going globetrotting of the films with some of the more complex and thoughtful aspects of the novels. It's kind of everything great about Bond put in one place. It's just a really good, like, it's not too big, which is a problem I think most modern, maybe all Bond movies after a certain point have. It goes so big, like, this is big, but it's not so big. He's got a really good handle on James Bond. The villain is fascinating. The villain is someone referred to as Kraken.
Ooh,
and
that's a cool name.
We're told that they are a staunch anti-capitalist, and the kind of twist is you discover that they're not so much anti-capitalist as they are, like, imperialist. The motivation... Remember when I said last time that, like, all British science fiction starts with, and then we got the British Empire back? The motivation of the villain is, we're going to bring the British Empire back. And uses Make England Great Again in a way that did not take me out of it. Like, it wasn't like, I was like, oh yeah, like, we all will do that. It came out during the election cycle.
Oh, okay.
So like that was a thing. It's not a mistake that's there.
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting where it was James Bond is a servant of the government, a servant of the state, and the villain is a nationalist. That's not a thing I can think of in a lot of James Bond things where they're just really purely like England. It continues the violence of the Warnella stuff. I think all the Dynamite books will have that kind of edgier, more about you're not going to get this in the movies kind of a thing. But it's a little bit funnier Bond. It's not as cold and distant as Warnellis is. It's just really enjoyable.
It doesn't sound real self-serious or anything.
No, but it is serious when it needs to be serious. It's just. It's really quintessentially James Bond.
But it doesn't sound like it's trying to say, look how important I am. It sounds like it's just telling a story.
Yeah, it is. It just feels like a Bond adventure. That's a little bit topical, but not like beating you over the head with it.
Yeah.
I really like this.
There's a lot of things that are going on in the real world in the background in a lot of Bond stuff.
Yeah. I really like this. I don't think you have to read the first two to read this. I like this completely stands alone.
Do you think it's as good as the Alice stuff?
I do. I think it's more purely Bond. I think Ellis has I don't think Ellis likes Bond, which I think I talked about last time.
Yeah.
His Bond is a very cold person. This is a likable Bond
so
to some degree.
His take on it, where Diggle's just doing traditional Bond.
Or it's Diggle's take on it. Diggle's James Bond is a little bit more likable.
Yeah.
But it's quite good. If you like James Bond, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend the Ellis stuff to people that only like James Bond movies. This is going to be a little bit more violent than the movies, but you can read this if you've never read the James Bond book. Yeah, it's more traditional Bond. It's really good. Diggle has written one more miniseries. It hasn't been put out yet, but I'm really excited to read that. The next one that I have to read, which I don't own yet, is Black Box, which is written by Benjamin Percy, who's the current writer of Green Arrow. So that's the next one I'll read whenever I decide to buy that. But I've now gone through the 3 that I own. But yeah, big recommend for Hammerhead. I think it's really good.
The one solo thing I want to talk about this week, and I
wanted to read this, but I did not get a chance.
I haven't read any. Yeah, and we might revisit this at some point if you look at it, because there's stuff to sink our teeth into with this, and I'm just going to do a real quick little overview thing. But I don't have any new comics this week. I haven't been to the comic shop in a couple of weeks, and so I may run down some pulls next time. But anyway, so I'm going to talk a little bit about World of Krypton, which DC's been selling really hard since the TV show started, or a couple of weeks before the TV show started. And we mentioned last show that it was kind of weird that they put out the first issue of this. This is John Byrne with pictures from the TV show on the cover, or drawings for of the likenesses of those characters on the cover, and I was like, well, it's not that world at all. Why are you doing that? And I thought it was a new thing called World of Krypton, and then they're just
it was really weird because you just got this trade. We were talking about, we bought the trade, and then I was like, hey, they're putting out a free thing that's the first issue of that.
Yeah, it was really strange. Now that I've read this, I totally get why they did that. Now, it is kind of weird that they put those likenesses on the cover, but I guess it was kind of just to sell it. I would really recommend, if you were watching the Krypton show, that you read this, because it informs it a lot more than I expected it to.
Interesting.
It's not that world. It's not exactly the same thing, most certainly. But
you think the makers of the show have read this?
Well, they have to have, because they pulled characters out of it that I'm pretty sure were only in this. The Black Zero thing comes from this. That's a thing I didn't realize. I thought Black Zero was just a spaceship. This is probably the reason that Zod's ship is called Black Zero in Man of Steel. If memory serves, that's what that is.
Obviously, David Goyer has read John Byrne's Superman. Like, that obviously informs his Krypton.
Yeah, and Goyer's, running that show.
Yeah.
Or he's one of the producers on that show, and wrote the pilot, or co-wrote the pilot. But anyway, so Black Zero is in Byrne's Krypton is the underground rebellion that is trying to overthrow the government, that ultimately ends up leading to the destruction of Krypton.
Interesting.
And I kind of wonder if they're maybe going to try to head in that direction with the TV show. And we don't know a lot about their Black Zero yet, so I don't know what exactly they're doing. But it's kind of, so far, just in the background. I'm gonna review that later. But so far, they're there, and the government is trying to stomp them out. But we don't know exactly what they want beyond just, well, we have this evil, oppressive government we're trying to get rid of. So it's kind of fun because you sympathize with them to a degree, because it is an oppressive government, and they are taking our freedoms away, and our freedom, because I'm Kryptonian. They are taking Kryptonians' freedoms away, and I'm jumping all over the place. That's the thing that's kind of weird in this, is they call themselves human, but they're on Krypton. They say human a lot. Which I guess I sort of appreciate, because it is a, how do we perfect our society as much as possible without losing our humanity? It might come off corny and weird if we say Kryptoninity or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If we did that, so they kind of, so Byrne, doesn't even mess with that or talk about it. It's just, we're on a planet called Krypton, but we're humans. Mm-hmm. Which I think is totally fair, but I was kind of surprised by it. They use the word human a lot. But anyway, so the idea with this book, it's 4 issues, and it spans a lot of time. And I initially thought, just thumbing through this, that it was 4 different stories, and it's not. It's one big story that spans a whole bunch of time, and it's kind of multi-generational, but that gets complicated because the Kryptonians are elongating their lifespans, and some of them are thousands of years old, which is a thing I did not know about Burns Krypton. And so the idea is not just that we're trying to have genetic perfection, and that's why parents don't copulate the normal way, and why they don't allow any kind of imperfections in the genome, which Man of Steel used with the Codex. But we find out that they also are trying to be immortal and live as long as humanly possible.
Does it explain why they're so opposed to any skin showing outside of the face?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is fascinating.
Okay.
And I'll get to that.
Interesting.
Yes. Thanks for bringing that up. So if I forget to get to that, remind me.
Yeah.
And I will spoil this some for folks that don't get around to reading it. This is a thing you didn't even know existed. I'm glad that DC is putting this back in the purview, because I think it's really good. I have some issues with it, but it is fast. It's not my Krypton. Weirdly, like, I like a lot of Burns' ideas that end up informing other versions of Krypton more than I like Burns' Krypton, I think.
So this did not feel like, oh, this is the Krypton book I've always wanted to read.
No, but I mean, I already had that with Anderson's book. That's
true.
The thing.
That's
it's like
true.
Anderson made the definitive Krypton for me in blending a bunch of different versions of it together, and so I don't know. I like that amalgamation better than I like Burns in general, which is probably fighting words for some people, because John Byrne is a lot of people's definitive Superman. But I kind of almost like his Superman more than I like his Krypton, but his Krypton is necessary for more of the Krypton that I like, I guess.
Well, but I also don't know anyone that has like a definitive, like, fighting words kind of like, because Krypton, we've talked about before, can go anywhere. Like, it could be a really bad society that deserves to be exploited. It could be a really pure society. It could be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, is there a quintessential Krypton? You know, the only take on that.
If any person has, like, well, I only like Krypton when they're all pure. Superman should come from a pure world, or Superman should come from a world that was meant to be, that was doomed, you know, from the get-go. I don't know if anyone has a real staunch...
Yeah, I like that take a little better, but I like it, but I kind of prefer a Krypton where there's a little bit more passion, which is what the TV show is attempting, but then this starts more from that place, and then over time you see why they got more stale and more sterile, and it's very, very interesting. Regardless of all of that. No, you're cool. So the idea is that part of the way Kryptonians thousands of years ago, and you know, going all the way up to just I guess a couple hundred years before. Well, now I'm trying to remember. No, it is still thousands of years. Excuse me, because we have an L that lives for so long that he's just been around for a long time. Anyway, so the part of the way that the Kryptonians elongate their lives is with cloning, and they each have a clone of themselves, and then they harvest organs from that clone throughout their life, and they get I think they get 3 clones for different stages of their lives, and they harvest the organs from that clone, and that's part of how they elongate their lives. And as time goes on, they come up with more methods to do this, and eventually they come up with methods that are considered more humane. But Black Zero comes together because they don't think that what they're doing with the clones is humane, and they think the clones should be free, and that they should get to live amongst the society, even though the clones are apparently like brain dead. And I guess they think that you shouldn't clone a person and just use them as an object for your own use and desire, and it's not enough that... Because the Kryptonian society thinks that it's good enough just that, well, we don't let them think for themselves, and so they're not really alive. And so there's a big kind of, existential question with that. And so anyway, ultimately there ends up being a big giant war. And what eventually leads us to the what the society looks like at the end, where no one, like you were talking about, is really talking and communicating with each other very much, and they cover their bodies head to toe and stuff like that. Is that we get to a point where you're supposed to be completely isolated and not actually talk to anyone. Hardly at all. It becomes really taboo to even have physical interaction with anyone because we're afraid of more wars and things happening.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool where it goes to because we basically just completely lose our humanity in order to try to save it. and but Black Zero is still there and still trying to. Basically, Black Zero also loses its humanity at the same time as it's trying to save it, because it thinks that Krypton itself deserves to die because it allowed this cloning culture thing to happen in the first place, and so
should be allowed to die.
Yeah, and so they want it, completely decimated. One of the things that's weird about this book is that there's a different framing device almost every issue. By the third issue. I think the first issue is just straightforward, and then after that we have framing devices, and so you have you have Seagal, who is the character that we follow in the TV show.
Okay.
He's adapted from this. You have him looking back on things that were happening from a long time ago, and then you have later on. Jor-El looking back on him, and then you have Superman looking back on Jor-El, and it's really strange.
So Superman shows up in this book.
Yeah, and he's explaining how all of this leads to the destruction of Krypton to Lois. It's like the first time that he's telling her what exactly happened with this planet. And at first I was sort of like, why are we talking about, why are we going back this far, and why are we dealing with specifically this clone war? And then it turns out that that's the catalyst that ultimately leads to the destruction of the planet, and it's all interconnected, and it is one big story, but it spans so much time that it's kind of too complicated to just follow one character throughout it, and so it doesn't do that. But it is weird that we just have one framing device. It would almost be better if it starts with Superman, I think.
Yeah, that's what I immediately thought when you were like, and then Superman's telling Lois, I'm like, why wouldn't Superman just tell Lois the whole? Well, how is that not your framing device?
And I think part of the reason it does that is because it's trying really hard to be readable issue to issue if you don't have it all together. And reading it in trade, that gets a little bit maddening. There are a couple of places where entire scenes you've read before get reprinted in the middle of an issue. And if you were, if you just bought one issue outside of the rest of it, that you wouldn't even notice that. And it's kind of banking on more people doing that, I guess. Almost as if it doesn't understand the concept of trading and of reading everything together. It's really strange. And of course, we were already starting to do that by this point.
Or of even collecting. Like we're now into the collector boom. Mm-hmm. People are gonna buy the whole thing, read all together. This is post Watchmen. This is post Dark Knight Returns.
So that was a little strange. And yet, it is one complete story, so you do kind of want to have all of it together. It's
as you went on, did you start just skipping the pages that you'd already read?
No, because they're so integrated. It was kind of difficult to do that. And what's weird is you would have part of a page that was where a scene is reprinted and it is the same artwork, but then it would go into panels that are new.
Oh. So it's not even skippable.
No, it's so integrated. Yeah, it was really strange. Anyway, but eventually I'd like to get deeper into that and sink my teeth a little bit more into it. It's been a couple of weeks, and so I'm rusty on it. But it's I don't know, it's fascinating, and this trade is cool because in the back of it they reprint a couple of other old Krypton stories, which I've not read. But they're here if you want them, and then you can kind of compare and contrast.
Does it reprint anything from the other world of Krypton?
It doesn't.
Interesting.
And that I have a couple issues of, and I don't know what's in it. I don't recall. But anyway, and then the last issue of this has a scene that is almost word for word. It's not completely reprinted, but it's almost word for word from the Laura Jor-El scene that's in Man of Steel, and then they reprint the first. They reprint just those pages from Man of Steel in this, so that you get those and you see how close they are. And it's easier to tell that John Byrne is being really close-knit with his continuity. And it's great. And like, that stuff I really appreciated, because it's interlaced with panels that you didn't get in that are connecting it up more. It's almost like we're peeling the curtain back, and it's like, oh, this is what led to Jor-El feeling the need to send the spaceship off. And
interesting.
All of that, yeah.
That's really cool.
It is really cool. So yeah, I highly recommend this, especially if you're reading Krypton right now, or if you're watching Krypton right now. But I will say that there's some things about it being printed month to month that are a little bit irritating. But that's my main gripe with it.
Sure.
And the weird framing device thing. But anyway.
No time travel?
No time travel. Yeah, we'll get into that later. But yeah, so what are you talking about your last
last
thing?
of all, I will talk about the first 3 volumes of Berserk. which I'm sure I've said before, like, just Berserk is, like, my favorite thing. Volumes, I think it's 4 to 14. I guess it starts in volume 4 to whenever that story ends. It's, like, 11 volumes long. That all as a piece is the best thing I've ever read. In my entire life, Berserk, the Golden Age arc, is the best thing I've ever read.
So weird, and I've never heard anyone talk about this before.
It's one of those things that's, like, really beloved by the people that know it. So this is... I read all of Berserk once, and then this is my third time going through at least the first 14 volumes of Berserk. I bought all of these. Originally I read it from my library, which is insane because of how adult this is.
Yeah.
But originally, or I bought through 14, the whole first chunk of Berserk, a couple of years ago, and I reread all of it, and I read these volumes, and I was like, oh no. This isn't going to hold up, or it's not as good as I thought it was. And then when I got into the big flashback arc, I was like, oh no, it is. It is just as good as I thought it was. It's just a rocky start. So going back for reading this arc, for this, I was expecting, it's not going to be good. It's better than I remembered it being from my second reading. So basically, the first 2 chapters of the first book are just standalone. They're just kind of like introductory stories. And then the rest of this is one long story, except for the last chapter of this, which is the beginning of the big, huge 11-volume story. I don't think this works completely continuously. So we catch up, or we start with Guts, and Guts is going around killing these things called apostles, which are big, like, weird demon things. And we don't know why he's doing any of this. And we eventually find out, kind of, and then after this, we're going to, for 11 volumes, we're going to give you the entire backstory of this character. It should have started there. Because if you didn't read these, and you started there and then read these, where they would fall chronologically, I don't think it lines up. I think who he is at the end of that story, he's not as prickly, he's not as much of a jerk, he's not... There's a thing about him not liking being touched, which is a character thing we resolve in the flashback story. He has it in the flashback story and he moves past it. It's just not fully formed, and I know from, like, looking at things about the author that, like, he didn't have this all planned out. He didn't even know he was going to do a huge flashback arc. And there's really important things that happen in the flashback arc. He didn't even know he was going to do that. I think now he does. He said he's about halfway done. He's 40 volumes in. This has been going since, I think, 88.
Oh, it's still going.
It's still going.
It's that long cards thing. It's wow.
But it's all one guy.
And it's that Stanza guy thing.
Yeah. This is a good introduction to the world, and I think it gives you a good enough sense of the flavor, especially when you get into volumes 2 and 3 and the arc really starts going, of the kind of ideas that we're going to be talking about and looking at, and humanity and desperation. And Berserk is a very dark series and deals with really dark things, but it's not without its optimism. And I think one of the things that he gets immediately right and is really important up front is that Guts is a guy who kind of doesn't care about anyone and is very, like, the strong survive and the weak die, which I don't think fully lines up with where he'll actually be in the timeline when we get to this point. But he immediately gives a character that's a little annoying, but it's at least someone there to say, like, I'm not saying, like this is not what I'm saying. This is a character saying something, and he's being told he's a jerk, and he's told that he's being too mean to certain people and things like that. Berserk is super violent. It's super violent and super sexual. I think, if nothing else, this first arc tells you up front that there are no limits for Berserk. It will go anywhere. It will talk about anything. It's a really dark medieval fantasy. You're going to have slavery, violence, rape, you're going to get everything in this, and it's going to deal with it. Some of it really deals with, some of it is just, well, it's medieval, there's torture.
Yeah.
And things like that. And there's
part and parcel of that world.
Yeah, and there's some really violent torture. It's a real, like, not heroic fantasy thing in that, like, or not romanticized.
Yeah.
It is fantastical in that, like, this is not history, this is not set in England, it's just kind of a pseudo, medieval time period. But, like, everything sucks. And, like, some people are okay with their lives, but, like, everything kind of sucks. And there are certain things that he does that I think work really well, where, like, there's a point where there's just two guards talking, and they're like, these are guys that probably go around and murder people. The majority of this story is about a guy who murders heretics and pagans and things like that. Like, ruthless. It's like a witch hunt kind of a thing, where, like, if there's even a suspicion, and most of the people he's murdering at this point probably aren't heretics or pagans, there's a point where there's these two guards who probably have murdered people for these things because that's what they've been told to do, or like, nothing ever happens, like, you want to just go? Like, let's just go, like grab some food, we'll come back, no one will know. He's like, if we get caught, we'll get murdered here. And, like, it's a small little moment where they're really humanized, and like, it's like, well, what else are they going to do? Living in this world, in this part of the country where this is the guy in charge, like, what else are they gonna do? Like, they're just guys working jobs. And then Guts comes and just murders both of them ruthlessly. It's a real, like, it doesn't really take sides kind of thing. It's like, okay, look, these guys aren't all bad, but they're still gonna get murdered by the protagonist because he doesn't care.
I always appreciate when we give those people personalities.
Yeah, me too.
Because a lot of the time we like to pretend like they're like as ideologically committed as the person that hired them, and you're like, but why?
Yeah, they're not all zealots.
Yeah.
Berserk is a lot about zealotry and about hypocrisy. So the main villain of this first arc is a guy who hates heretics and pagans and murders all of them. And we're told this backstory that by his daughter, who he keeps trapped in a castle. She's never seen the outside world, kind of a thing. And we're told this backstory that, like, his wife was murdered by like some kind of evil cult. And so, like, ever since then, he's just gone crazy. And, like, he just murders everyone. And then we find out that's not true. What actually happened was, he was out murdering heretics. Like, that's just a thing apparently this guy has always done, but just not as vehemently as he's doing it now. He came home. I'm going to say a word that I don't think has ever been said on Geekvolution, but I can't say it. And, well, and it actually might come up later.
Wait, did you say, I'm going to say it, but I'm not going to say it?
No. I'm going to say a word that I don't think has ever came up on Geekvolution, but I don't know. I have no other word that I can use in place of this. And it's going to come up later. We'll talk about it with society. So it's okay. He comes home and there's a massive orgy.
Yeah. I don't know that we've ever said that word on camera.
I don't think so. It's a word.
We do have to talk about that later.
But there's a massive orgy of all of these, like, Satanist not Satanist because it's not our world. There's no Christianity or Satanism kind of thing, but demon worshippers kind of people. It's just masses. It's just flesh everywhere, and there's a big, like, goat statue kind of a thing. Doing this, which I see a lot in things with mysticism. This must be something. Like, I never thought about it, but I'm like, yeah, it's a symbol I see a lot in, like, mystic things, but, like, it's goat statue, and his wife's part of it. She's actually with the statue.
I want that to mean something really uncouth, so that somebody just, takes the picture out and posts on his Twitter. Yeah. You won't believe the sign Eric just threw up.
It's an anatomically correct statue, and his wife is with the statue of this, like, goat demon god thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it will go anywhere.
It will go anywhere. And so he goes, like, immediately crazy and just murders everyone in the room except for his wife. And, like, he has this moment where he's like, I can't. She's still my wife. Like, I can't kill her, and she knows that, and she's got, like, this knowing smirk on her face. Like, you're still not gonna kill me. And then the God Hand shows up, which is 5 demon guys. I think they work for God. It's not. There's a lot of mysteries in the universe still, but they're referred to as the God Hand. They show up and they're like, if you give up the thing that's most important to you in your life, we will give you power. And so all he has to do is say, murder my wife, and he'll be given power. And he becomes like this weird slug thing, and like his head's not his head, and it's very... Berserk is really good at...
And it's the best thing Eric has ever read.
Not these 3. It gets there.
Okay.
Berserk is really good at being Lovecraftian without looking like Lovecraft, where, like, it's the sense of it where it's like, I don't know how to describe this. It's like a slug, dragon, man, wolf thing. Like, I don't know how to describe that. That's and that's what Lovecraft is. I think a lot of people do, like, they just do Cthulhu. It's tentacles. He's not doing that, but it's that kind of sense of, like, this is beyond anything that we have on our planet. Like, it's a bunch of different things. And it's, and then the Godhead comes again. They're like, we'll make you even more powerful. You just have to let your daughter die. It also plays Really fun with the, like, I cannot die thing. Once you become an apostle, which are people that have been given powers by the God Hand and become monsters, you can't die. That doesn't mean you don't feel pain. And so, like, Guts just tortures these people, or these monsters. Like, you're just like, okay, you can't die, but I'm gonna make it so you want to die. Like, nothing's stopping me from doing that. Also, I think Berserk is the first place for the giant sword. I cannot anything that predates it.
Oh, interesting.
If anyone knows of anything before Berserk that does the giant sword...
How old is Berserk?
I think 88.
What do you mean by the giant sword?
I mean, like, in anime and video game, and specifically Japanese video games, you always have the character with, like, the insanely huge sword. Like, Final Fantasy has this, like, you know, where, like, a character has, like, a sword that's, like, huge.
Yeah.
Lots of anime has this. Inuyasha has it. Like, lots of anime has, like, the guy with, like, the really big sword.
Like, almost like it was made for a giant, but he's picking it up.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times the handles are like normal size, but like I'm trying to find a picture of the sword so you can see it. Like it's huge. It's bigger than he is.
Oh yeah, okay, okay. Sure.
It's a big anime trope. I don't know of it before this. And there's a lot. It's basically a slab of metal, and this is how it's described constantly.
As a slab of metal.
It's less like a sword and more like a slab of metal.
That's funny.
Yeah, I don't need it to be repeated as many times as it is, because that's how everyone describes it. Like, verbatim, the same words is like, it's more like a slab of metal
big
than a
bismuth.
sword.
We get it.
Yeah. The big thing, first of all, I can't say skip these, because the beginning of the next story arc is the last chapter in Book 3.
Oh, okay.
I also can't say skip these, because I think if you start at the beginning, if you start at the beginning of the next arc, you don't exactly have a sense of what's going to happen. This is kind of in medias res used well, where you're going to have a large span of time that's not fantastical. It's just medieval, and we will eventually get to the demons and all the stuff that you saw in the first, but you have no sense of that at the beginning of it. This kind of tells you up front, like, this is going to go nuts. It's going to get really big and really crazy, and we're dealing with huge cosmological things.
So you're not gonna be blindsided by that.
Yeah. Or like 9 volumes in, you're like, well, this came out of nowhere.
Well, and it needs to give the weirdness up front if it's gonna be that weird.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just look at the opening pages. Like, it immediately tells you, like, it's got that thing that you like, where it's no. Actually, scroll back. Like, literally the first couple of pages. It has the thing that you like, where it's like, it tells you up front.
Holy crap! Yeah.
This is how. Wow. This is how, like. If you can't handle this, get out now.
Yeah, get out now.
Also, that opening scene doesn't make sense with his characterization later either.
I like that in horror especially.
Yeah, and this is, I would describe Berserk as like a political horror fantasy, especially in the next arc where it gets very political. But like, it is a lot about like chancellors and kings, and it's a lot about people in power and abusing that power. And these first 3 volumes are not great, but they are stepping stones, and it's very much he's kind of figuring it out. Also, the artwork in this is great. It will get better, and it just keeps getting better. Like, something's different about Japanese artists and American artists, where, like, a lot of American artists we don't like anymore. Like, their style's gotten something's missing. I don't know what it is. Neil Adams doesn't look like Neil Adams. Like, he does, but something's missing.
Yeah, a lot past their prime, almost like athletes or something.
Japanese artists don't seem to have that. They seem to keep getting better. Maybe it's because they just keep working.
Yeah.
Whereas American artists seem to take breaks and become writers, and like their style kind of.
Well, yeah. Sometimes they'll leave and go do something else for a while, and they'll be writers, or they'll be producers or something, and then they'll come back to comics and draw, and they haven't drawn in 10 years.
Well, and when you're working on like one thing for almost your entire career, you don't have time to like
constantly perfecting your craft.
Yeah, and you don't have time to experiment and be like, well, what if I drew a little bit more blockier? What if I did this, and what if I colored it this way? You don't have time to do that when you're putting things out weekly.
Especially with the big 2 American artists that will ape someone for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly start trying to do their own thing, and then sometimes they'll have almost a second career, like Greg Capullo, where like now Greg Capullo has a Capullo style that you don't associate with McFarlane at all.
Yeah, it's true. So yeah, I would recommend these just because Berserk is the greatest thing that's ever been made. If you have the right sensibilities, you have to like. It helps to like fantasy. You have to be okay with horror, and all that entails. It's also interesting this comes out in the 80s, because, like, this feels very 80s in I think, a good way, but, like, it's that something in the water kind of thing. Like, this obviously comes out around the time of, like, Reanimator and Evil Dead and all of those things.
Yeah, I immediately thought of heavy metal. Just
heavy metal. It is very adult. It's one of the most... I was reading this at 16, I should not have been. But you do... Like, you kind of have to start at the beginning. I don't think you can skip. And I don't think these are bad. Revisiting it a second time, it's not the, like, colossal thing that I had when I went back... rereading this second time. When I reread it the first time, where I was like, oh, this isn't as good as I remember. I kind of went in with those expectations, like, it's a little bit better than what I'm giving it credit for. It's a little bit more indicative of what the series will be. I will not be reviewing the next arc on the next show, I don't think, because it's 11 volumes of manga. It'll probably take me... There might be 2 or 3 omnibuses before I get back to Berserk.
Oh, yes, you will review it, but it won't be next time.
Yeah. I am...
you can split it up, I guess, but...
I want to talk about this piece.
Okay, sure.
It's 11 volumes. I kind of consider it one graphic novel. It's the greatest graphic novel ever written, as in my opinion. But yeah, I will cover it. I am going back through Berserk, and there's stuff of this I haven't read just because I like to read the arcs, and the arcs are like 5 to 10 volumes a piece, and so I buy it all at once, and I have to like volume like 22 or something. It's up to like 38. So like there's stuff that I haven't read, but I'm kind of going back through all this just because I want to. When I finish the Golden Age arc, I will talk about it again.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, next time on the Comic Vault, Eric and I are going to tackle the entirety of Boom's Power Rangers up to this point, with the possible exception of Power Rangers Pink. I don't know if we'll get to that, but...
Oh, I forgot that existed.
Yeah, but you wanted to read Go-Go up to now, and we had already said that we were going to, or decided together anyway, that we were going to read up till 25. So, so we're going to do everything and...
Up until Shattered Grid.
Shattered Grid, yeah, so that we can, we'll play catch-up, and then when that's over, we'll review Shattered Grid.
Yeah.
But,
because I've only read the first issue, and I think one issue you handed me, I think it was the first Raken issue, where you're like, you gotta read this, and I think I read that.
Yeah. And we may find, because I thought that might be a little bit too much. You might find that you'll want to split it up into 2 after we finish the Draken arc. But the arc we're in the middle of right now, we're very much in the middle of. And so I think it might be a good idea to go ahead and just read all the way up, so that we can, then get to Shattered Grid, because it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of finality before we get to Shattered Grid. We're still in the middle of a lot of stuff with, the former Red Ranger from the 70s and all of that. So, but that's what we're going to do next time. So, look forward to that. And in the meantime, thanks a whole bunch for watching. We sure appreciate it. And this concludes this week's Comic Vault.